I was like a really good player.
Just the appreciation of basketball at all levels.
Yeah, I'm a player. I feel like I just gotta get on the court. I feel like if I get the opportunity to get on the court, that's where the name comes from. Everyday guys and the everyday conversations we have.
Welcome everyone to episode 9 of the Everyday Guys podcast. Today we have Sheldon Cassimy on. He's been in the hoop scene for quite some time. Been a coach at all levels. He's been my coach at the CEBL level, and it's going to be a pleasure talking to him and asking him some questions. So welcome, Sheldon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. One of the first questions I like to ask a lot of people who are coaching is, you've been around basketball your entire life. Did you always see yourself eventually end up coaching, or was it something that just kind of happened?
I wouldn't say I always saw it, but I think I did see it relatively early. I would say I was probably I think I was 18 or 19 when I got my first chance to actually just coach a team. It was just like like a little house league, a church league, but it was pretty competitive. And so that, made me believe that, like, hey, I could actually do this, and this is actually pretty fun. And again, it was against pretty good talent. Like, I actually had Corey Joseph on my team. He was in 10th grade. And in that league, it was like Dylan Ennis, Tyler Ennis. So a lot of like high level players when they were really young. And so I was like, man, I actually like this. This is fun. Kind of just started from there.
If I'm not mistaken, one of your first major jobs with the A's, correct?
Yeah, that was my first pro job.
So I feel like pretty early on in your coaching career, you landed a pro job. How were you able to get in with the A's? I feel like you kind of like started your career inverse. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that one was interesting because at the time, I was actually running a pro-am league, made Toronto pro-am league. And so this is just before Crown League. And so, I was able to get a lot of the top Canadian pros. And, a lot of the NBL guys were around for the summer. I knew that they were pretty much staying there in Orangeville. And so I think I had about 3 or 4 of them playing in the pro-am. And so the GM at the time, David Magley, he actually, inquired about me and realized that I did a lot of player development. And that's pretty much how the pro-am started. And so, he brought me on board there with Brampton A's to do player development.
Was it kind of like, a huge learning curve at the pro level dealing with guys who are obviously, elite at the sport, and you were a relatively new coach, or did you kind of automatically feel in place and knew exactly kind of how you wanted to coach these guys?
I would say I learned a lot in terms of more basketball, like X's and O's. I think it was pretty easy for me to deal with most of the guys. And, there's always going to be a couple where it's a little bit more difficult. But most of the guys, because I was still around their age, so I was kind of like that coach that they felt like they could come and talk to and hopefully reason with and, get an honest opinion. So in terms of dealing with the guys, I think it was somewhat easy because, again, I'm around the same age group, but it was a huge learning curve in terms of like learning basketball and learning the pro game. I spent a lot of time with Coach Paul McKeskey. He was the associate head coach. So, when you're an assistant, you do a lot of the scouting and things like that. So we did all the scouts together, and I learned a tremendous amount from him. Like he taught me so much that I still, even think back sometimes today, and I'm like, oh wait, I learned this with Coach Mo. So I learned a lot. That year was like tremendous for me.
How do you think you were able to gain the respect from the players being around the same age, right? Because I mean that's kind of how I started, right? When I started coaching for the first time, I started at university, right? And I was like around the same age as them. So how do you get them to listen to you and like actually value your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think again it started because I already knew some of them.
Mm,
So for instance, Ashton Smith, he was one of the guys on the team. I already knew him from way back in high school. Um, Eventually, we had Kyle Johnson on the team. We also had Richard Amardi. Uh, and so I was already in the gym with those guys, working them out during the summers. Even while I was in, uh, even when I was in university, I would come back and I would help out and coach some of the pros. That's pretty much how I started with the player development.
all right.
So I think because I already had that mutual respect of already being in the gym with them, and them just knowing that I was willing to work hard and willing to learn, whether it's from them or whatever the case was, I was just ready to work hard, and I was doing that for free. Um, so I think I was able to gain a mutual respect there. Even David Tyndale was actually on that team as well. And so, there was already like a mutual respect coming in, and then it was just a matter of, I guess displaying that through practice that I'm willing to work hard. I'm willing to come back to the gym with them. I find a lot of the time like the sweat equity that you put in with guys. I feel like that helps to translate in them trusting you. And so I did a lot of that. I actually made sure I was in the gym every evening, anytime anybody wanted to put in any extra work. So I think that went a long way in terms of them somewhat listening. You know how it is sometimes with pros, like they'll listen, but they'll listen to a certain extent. Um, but we also had really good vets, and one of the vets, his name was Akeem Scott. Uh, I actually knew him previously as well, um, from just helping out with. I think Canada was playing Jamaica one time, and I was helping out with the Jamaican team as a liaison or the attaché. So I might have been like 20, and so that's when I met Akeem Scott, and so he ended up being one of the vets that came with us with Brampton A's. So um, even having that mutual respect there with one of the vets, it made a big difference.
I think from a player's perspective, you hit the nail on the head where I can just speak from the CBL when you guys were, working with us and not just like, rebounding, really like, working out with us. It definitely does gain you guys a certain level of respect where the players see that you genuinely care about us getting better. And then when you match that with, having a good personality and just being good dudes, I think that's the perfect mix to ultimately gain the respect of high level players. So I think you're spot on with that.
Mhm. Yeah, actually now that I'm getting a little bit older and I'm not on the court as much, I actually hate it. Like
Really? Yeah.
yeah, I hate it. Like I catch myself sometimes in practice saying, man, to one of the assistants, get off. I need to get on the court, just to feel that I'm actually, getting that kind of juice back. Like I like being on the court and being able to, even though I'm not the greatest player, I can still lock up a little bit sometimes. So
You got a little bit of something, I remember.
yeah, it's a little bit, just a little bit.
Okay, so you get your feet wet on the pro scene pretty early, and then you talk to us about your transition into ultimately where you are now, the youth sports space. Kind of how did that happen, and was it a big difference transitioning from the pros, your role in the pros to where you started out in youth sport and OUA?
Okay, so my journey has been kind of back and forth. So the year before Brampton A's, I was actually at U of T. That was actually my first, I guess you could call it, job after college or
Mhm.
after university. So I was actually at U of T. So I went from U of T to Brampton A's, and then I went back into U Sport at Ryerson. Um, and so that was the year that Coach Patrick Tatum was the interim head coach. Um, Again, I know Patrick from mutual friends, and so I was able to coach with him that year, and that year was a fantastic year. I think that was the first, yeah, that was the first OUA championship in Ryerson at the time, Ryerson history. Um, They actually beat Carleton in the OUA championship. Didn't quite uh, win the gold medal in nationals, but that year for me was, I think, a huge leap. Also, like I went from Brampton A's to now learning even more about the U Sports level and being able to, transfer some things there. And I was given more responsibility there. So that's how I ended up working with Coach Patrick Tatum, and some years went past. I was more helping out at the Canada Basketball Training Center, or I guess running the Canada Basketball Training Center. COVID hit, and uh, me and PT, we stayed in touch. It's a close friend of mine, and he's looking for another assistant, and it's like, hey, come on, come back, let's win an OUA championship. So the transition back was, again, it was great. I think I've been able to bring all the different things from the different levels and the different teams. That was actually even the same, I think, after the same year, or during the same year that I was already with Hamilton Honey Badgers in the bubble year.
Yeah.
So, being able to bring, the experience of coaching in U Sport already, but also coaching in the pros, I was able to bring that to McMaster. And I think we've been able to, help get the program to where it is today.
Speaking of the National Training Center, actually, I don't know if you remember, Sheldon, but I have a text message that I got from you back in 2019,
Mhm.
being like, "Oh, I heard good things about you. Let's talk." And it was about, helping out with the National Training Center, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, my goal at the time was I wanted to make a living coaching basketball,
Yeah.
right? And you and I both know that coaching isn't always, lucrative financially, definitely not, right?
Right.
Um, the amount of time and effort that you put in, maybe the reward materialistically might not be the same amount of outcome,
Mhm.
right? That's why I mean that's why I personally have huge amount of respect for anybody who coaches, right? Because it's the amount of investment that they put in by themselves, and then the reward isn't that great sometimes, right?
Right.
But how are you able to kind of keep a level head and be like, okay, this type of investment, this type of volunteering, so to speak, is gonna, you know, be rewarding at some point.
You know, I guess I just had the theory that, like, I wasn't really doing it for the money.
Yeah,
Uh, I was always trying to figure out a way to be able to do it and still make money. And that
right.
was always my mindset. It wasn't I wasn't doing it to make money, if that makes any sense. So I guess when it started happening where now it's my full-time job, it was kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? It wasn't like that was necessarily the only thing I was thinking about and going after. And so, I always had different things on the side that I was doing in order to be able to make ends meet. And I pretty much just always tried to make sure that it that it worked with me wanting to still, coach at whatever capacity it was. So even like the training center, that's only in the summer. That's for four
Yeah.
months, just 3.5 months. So I just made sure, during the rest of the time that I was doing things to hopefully make ends meet. It didn't always meet. It was rough at times.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I just knew that was my passion and that would make me happy. So even when there was a time when I was only at the training center and I was just working for the other, whatever it is, 8 months or so. Oh man, that was like rough. That was like
Yeah.
the worst time of my life, to be honest. Um, like I just wasn't happy, and so that's where I kind of knew. And that's part of the reason why I actually reached out to PT to see if he even had an opening at McMaster. Because I was just like, man, I can't be, doing mortgages. Uh,
Right,
you know what I mean? I can't see myself doing this for the rest of my life.
right.
It wasn't enjoyable, and so just luckily, it just worked out once I reached out to PT.
So I guess did you ever have a moment where you're like doing this basketball stuff, spending a lot of time on the court, not making a lot of money, you're like, you know what, fuck this, I can't do this anymore. Was there any point in your career where you're like, well, I do want to go back to my maybe a real job and make some decent living?
No.
No.
like there was, again, so I ended up doing the mortgages, and this is after the year at TMU, now TMU. So I did say, okay, let me try to find something that's more lucrative. But again, it was trying to find something that's more lucrative where I could still do basketball in some kind of capacity. So it was actually a really good investment in my mind that year, because I actually ended up coaching at Crawford Adventist Academy, which is, a private school in Toronto. It's actually the private school that I went to for school. So I was doing mortgages. I was a substitute teacher there as well, and I was coaching the team. So I knew I was going to be able to get to coach the team, and so I actually feel like I got a good amount of reps as just a head coach, and trying to figure out different things that I like as a head coach, my demeanor, like anything. Like I was just doing anything I could as a head coach, and I feel like it's actually helped me to get to this point. It wasn't the highest level, but again, because I was just involved in basketball, and I knew I still wanted to be involved in basketball in whatever capacity it was, then it was still there. So no, I never turned my back on basketball. Like that's my passion. I don't think I'll ever say, hey, I don't want to coach, or I don't want to be on the court anymore.
You've mentioned that even early on, and might not have been at the highest level, but coach, you've been able to see what you like about coaching, your demeanor and whatnot throughout your entire coaching career. Like I said, you've been at all levels, you've been an assistant, you've been a head coach. What are some of the things that coaching has revealed to you about your own character?
I think it's revealed that sometimes I do lose my cool, and I do have to make sure I keep my emotions intact in order to make intelligent decisions all the time, or most of the time. Um, I think I think that's one of the biggest things for in game. Um, but when it's like off the court stuff, I didn't really learn anything else about myself. I always knew that I just wanted to be able to help people. Um, I knew that I wasn't necessarily the best player to be able to play at a pro level. So I was always kind of just living through everyone else and trying to help everyone else to get there. Um, I think I found my own gratification in that. And so, that part remained the same. And I think I just found new ways to do it. But I think in terms of what I learned, it was more like X's and O's,
Yeah.
that I need to get better in certain areas, like again, the X's and O's, probably offensively. Um, and just, in terms of the decision making, in-game decision making, like I was able to learn those things. I feel like I'm learning more and more of it every year, really.
Gotcha.
And so even as an assistant, sometimes you kind of like I've been able to watch Coach Ryan Schmidt very closely, and PT, and then now I stepped into a head coaching role. I kind of see, okay, that's why he was doing this, or that's why he did that, and so I think you still kind of keep learning different things about yourself and what needs to be done as you go along.
What do you think is the biggest difference being an assistant coach versus a head coach? I mean, they're obviously the pressure level is probably different, right? The things that you focus on are probably different, but what do you think is the biggest difference being an assistant versus a head coach?
So other than those two things that you've mentioned,
Yeah.
uh, other than those, Nico actually probably get a little laugh out of this, but I realized that it's actually very hard to communicate as a head coach. Um, it's, it's just different, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to be more intentional about it. So, like for instance, me and Nico, we developed a close relationship. I was an assistant. I'm on the court with him. I'm able to talk with him at any time. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit of a different dynamic. When you're a head coach, you have to be a little bit more intentional about your communication, because there's so many of the things that you're focused on and doing that sometimes, at least for me, I felt like this past summer, um, some of the communication wasn't always there. I wish I was able to communicate with the guys a little bit more. And I think it's just the relationship and the dynamic is just a bit different now. So it's just a matter of about being intentional about it.
I do think even from a player's perspective, as much as like, okay, you shifting from an assistant coaching job to a head coaching job doesn't change who you are as a person. But like you said, the change of the role does change the dynamic and the openness I feel to speak to you. Like, I feel like players are always, if they have an issue, a complaint, or something they're not okay with, they automatically go to the assistant because they know it's just more of a like lower stakes kind of like conversation, where with the head coach, you don't really, automatically start yapping your mouth about this, and that, because he's ultimately the guy behind the main decisions. So I can definitely see, speaking from a player's perspective, how that would be tougher on your end too, because the players probably feel differently with you being a head coach now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I do have a bunch of questions about the Honey Badgers, but before we get into that, I wanted to shift back to U Sport. A big thing about coaching is recruiting, right? And making sure you build the best possible roster for the best possible team. And so the first question I have with recruiting is, you're in, I would say, a somewhat difficult situation in U Sport where you constantly have to battle with trying to get kids to realize that a U Sport avenue could be beneficial to them over a D1 avenue. And I always wanted to know from a coaching perspective how difficult it is to sometimes recruit these, like, teetering on D1 U Sport guys, and how do you try and get them to come to your school basically?
It's extremely difficult, man. And I understand it, and I think because I understand it, our approach sometimes is a little bit different. But yeah, we're trying to get the guys who are probably mid-major Division I players, or low-major Division I players, and I think sometimes the sell is a little bit different. I think now that I am in the CEBL and also coaching on a youth sport team, we try to let them know that, hey, there is opportunity here to be a professional basketball player. It sometimes is, you have a higher chance than if you were to go to a mid-major or a low Division I school. Now I understand that, over there they're paying for everything that you need, tuition and all that, but we just try to find other ways to help compensate for that with them over here. So that part is always difficult, and sometimes you get, the players say, "Forget you guys, I'm still going to go to Division I school." And then maybe like late August or so, sometimes you get you get a guy who really didn't get what he was looking for, that ends up coming home or staying home, I should say. To be honest, this is my fourth season there at McMaster, and we haven't really gotten, since I've been there, I think we've only gotten one guy that was a borderline Division I player, that ended up staying home. I think we have gotten some good talent at the same time, that maybe just for whatever reason just wasn't getting any offers. Like, for instance, we have Tyler Garcia. He's like, I think he's like a guru at the point guard spot. And I think because he's small, that there was no Division I schools that wanted him, and most of the youth sports schools didn't even want him.
All right.
Luckily, through my relationships, I already knew him, and I spoke with him, and I spoke with his dad pretty early, and I told him, hey, if you guys find a school that wants Tyler that he'll play right away, then great, you can go there. But if not, you guys can come here. He might have to sit out for a year, but here's an opportunity. And that was, I guess, with everybody didn't really know how good he was. He came in his first year, and by the, I think, second regular season game, he was our starting point guard. So, you know, sometimes you find those kind of gems like that, or you kind of get lucky, I guess. And then you get the D1 transfer backs when they realize like this probably isn't for me.
Mm.
And that's just a matter of, you know, being able to evaluate the talent that you can say, hey, he's going to be a good U Sport guy, and he probably doesn't have any Division 1 offers. Let me make sure I go full throttle after him.
Yeah.
You must have some crazy stories and encounters with these like delusional players and delusional coaches too, actually. High school coaches that tell you that, oh, my kid is Division 1. So you can't, I don't think you can talk to him. Like he'll have options.
Yeah, yeah, you meet them all the time, and to be honest, a lot of them end up going to junior college or something like that, or they end up going to Division 2 school. But I think because both Coach PT and I understand that, hey, like, you know, they're chasing after, you know, the highest level, and you can't really knock them for chasing after the highest level where they're actually going to get their tuition and everything paid.
Yeah.
Obviously, we try to let them know, like, hey, there's also a really good education that you're going to be able to get at McMaster. Um, but you know, we understand. So when we do get those, we do meet, you know, those delusional coaches or delusional kids. Like, we don't really fault them for it,
Yeah.
and we just kind of keep in contact with them and just hope or kind of we have an idea of who's going to be the guy you need to recruit again in 2 years.
What's like the craziest thing you've heard from a player or even a prep coach or high school coach when you were trying to recruit the player?
Um, it hasn't been anything too crazy. I
No,
haven't gotten
really,
anything
huh?
too crazy.
Really?
No, like, no, you still get those guys who are like, I want to play D1. I want to play D1. But I
Yeah.
haven't, it's not like I've met anybody who said, D1, I'm an NBA player that is clearly not an NBA player, you know? Like, because I think that at the time that we're recruiting them, they kind of know, okay, where they're at. Like, if they're going to be a
Right.
borderline, you know,
Yeah.
Division 1 player, or if they could hopefully be a professional basketball player. Um, you know, there's actually one guy, I guess, that he's extremely talented. So I understood with him where he was like, man, I'm looking for a high major. Um, but just at the time, you know, the grades and how things were going, it wasn't really going in the right direction. So I was trying to shoot my shot to get him. Um, but he just decided to go the JUCO route, and now he's at a Division 1 school,
Mm.
a mid-major Division 1 school. So I don't really blame, again, I don't really blame the guys for, you know, going after their goals and their dreams. But you know, just trying to let them know that if they keep an open mind throughout your college career, that hey, this is a good avenue for you. Maybe to come home for your third, fourth, fifth year of eligibility, if you really want to be a professional basketball player or have a chance to play in the CEBL.
So do you find that you start the recruiting process a little bit later with guys who may have the potential to go to Division 1, and then, when they realize that they can't make it to that level, kind of looking at U Sport, do you think you guys start the process a little bit later than usual?
So I step into the process a little bit later.
Mm.
Have luckily we have, you know, a good amount of coaches, and we have you know, some guys that just help out with recruiting that, you know, kind of identify the guys a little bit younger. And so then by the time they're in their senior year or about to go into their senior year, that's when, you know, myself or PT will step in a little bit more. So luckily we have that luxury where I'm not going after a guy when he's in the 10th grade and I'm trying to follow him all the way until, and I don't know if he's going to do a fourth year or a fifth year. And, you know, luckily I don't have to do that in my situation. And I think it's helps because now I'm able to focus a lot more on just the coaching and managing our current team.
Speaking of recruiting, you know, Ray runs players with high school kids. A lot of our viewers are high school kids trying to get recruited. You as a university coach and as a pro coach, what are some of the main things you look for in recruiting players and being like, this is a guy I want on my team?
You talking about at either level?
More U sport.
Um, I actually try my best to look for guys that have something that can hopefully translate to the pro level. That's like my own little thing though. Um, so like I've kind of said it in the past a few years, like if I wasn't able to coach, my other thing would be like scouting, because I really enjoy scouting and just kind of finding the little gems here and there. So I actually purposely try to find that, like, what does this player have that could translate to him potentially being a professional basketball player? And so that's one of the things that I look at in terms of the recruiting, especially for the youth sport level. And then, trying to develop all the rest. Like, do I feel like he'll be able to develop a shot, even though the shot isn't very good, based on his touch, based on, the current mechanics or whatever he has? I try to look at those little things to see if, like, okay, yeah, he might not be a Division I player right now, but after 5 years, he could be a really good professional basketball player. So I try to look for more of those things, and that's usually the conversation that I have with them in terms of like, hey, like we're gonna try to develop you into a professional basketball player. You might not even see it yourself right now, but you might be able to play at that level if you're with the right coaches that are working on these things throughout your entire season.
How important are the intangibles to you? And off the court demeanor. Would you rather have a player who's ultra talented but an absolute asshole? Like an asshole in the sense of like not an asshole on the court. I mean an asshole like just a terrible, like a team cancer, or a guy who's extremely average in every capacity, but he's just going to be a great locker room guy.
Okay, so I think you need maybe so at the U sport level, 100% I'm looking for higher character guys, because it's funny, a lot of these conversations that I'm thinking about, I literally had these conversations within the last couple of weeks. Yeah, like sometimes I actually find that at the U sport level, or just like the university level, I think sometimes you actually get more guys that have lower character because they haven't really developed their character yet, or like understand what it takes to be a professional basketball player from a character standpoint. And I mean, also there's a threat of losing your job when you're a pro, so you kind of know you have to carry yourself a certain way. Whereas the kids kind of, I'm calling them kids, but they kind of feel like, oh, sometimes it's cool to like talk back to the coach or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, like, yeah, I want mostly high character guys, but you're gonna take maybe one or two guys that are a little rough around the edges and that need some guidance. Because at the end of the day, we want to be able to help young men to get a good education, to grow and develop into solid young men. So you'll still take some of those. But yeah, you definitely, I think when you recruit high character, it translates to winning. I mean, Nico, you were part of our championship team with the Honey Badgers.
Hell year.
Yeah, hell of a year. And I feel like, the character of our team was high level. I could say the same about the team that Coach PT and I coached at TMU, in terms of the character guys that we had.
Yeah.
Two of our leaders were Aaron Best, who was on our championship team, and also Adika Peter McNeely. So like the character of your leaders and of your team, I really think translates to winning. But again, you're still gonna have a couple guys that are maybe a little bit hotter heads, which we had a couple of those as well, but still high character guys.
Shifting to the pros with the CEBL specifically, this segues nicely into it. How you you touched on culture and character being important to winning. Obviously, when you recruit and you try and make a team, you try, especially at the pro level, you try and bring high character guys in who will, aid a winning culture. But after, you do your recruiting and your due diligence and you sign everyone, how intentional are you, especially in a short time frame in the CBL, in trying to really implement a certain culture? Like, you have good guys, you have good character guys. How do you as a coach try and continuously, reinforce that culture that you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the challenges that I found throughout the season. Um, again, it being my first full season as the head coach, you kind of learn and see, the different things that you really need to do throughout the season in order to carry things going along, whether it's through a losing streak or winning streak, whatever the case is. So I think it's just a matter of knowing exactly what it is that you're going to enforce on a almost like a weekly basis. And um, we have our pillars in terms of our foundation that it's based on your character. And after each game, I try to find one of those keywords that I could refer to, mention to the team, and say, hey, we did a really good job of this, or we need to get better at this aspect, whether it's humility, um, accountability, perseverance, whatever the case is that we have as our keywords of our culture, and just again like reinforcing that. So I was definitely intentional about mentioning at least one of those, after each game.
It being your first full season as a head coach this past year in the CBL, obviously I'm speculating, but I'm sure you took a lot of stuff from Ryan and our winning season, and I think Ryan, all you guys, the whole coaching staff did a great job of creating a culture that year, but Ryan was obviously the head of the snake. What are some, you mentioned earlier that you learned from him? What are some of the specific main takeaways you took from being an assistant coach under Ryan, specifically in that CBL season that we won?
Yeah, I think the biggest one of all is the culture. Um, he was able to, I guess, again, spearhead the culture, and um, it spoke volumes to me, and I saw it translated not only in in the year that we were together, but in all of the years. Um, so that was probably the biggest one that I would take from him, just the culture and how to continuously enforce it. I think um, also making sure that you're embodying that as the head coach, making sure that you're holding yourself accountable, that you have humility. I feel like that, also goes a long way. Like, as you guys know, we didn't have the best season in Brampton this year in terms of record wise. But one thing I would say is that character wise, the team was still very good. And I think it's because of the culture that we said, hey, this is the standard, and if you're not going to meet this standard, then like changes are probably going to get made. So not only recruiting high character guys, but you're still going to have a couple that maybe at times you know let the frustration get the best of them. But I think when we were able to reinforce the culture and the things that Ryan has established, um, I think that made a huge difference. Um, and then the other thing is that I would say I took from Ryan is um, just his organization, and how important it is to be very organized and particular. Because again, if you're not organized, like I've been a part of some teams that weren't very organized, and you can see that the players sense it, and then they start to, cut corners, or things don't necessarily go the right way. Whereas if the coaching staff is organized, prepared, on time, especially as much as possible, um, you know, uh, I think I think that makes a huge difference as well. And then I would say one more thing, just because I'm remembering more and more, but one more thing I would say is just reminding the players that we're here for them. and we're really truly here for them to get better. And that's what the culture of our team is about. All of us getting better, whether it's coaches, players, moving up higher and higher levels, and just getting better every day.
I
I
mean,
think it's
like,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's that year with the Honey Badgers specifically. All the three things you mentioned were definitely at the forefront of our program. I'd say that the culture was established. We did feel like all of you coaches were really there for us, and the organization. I mean, it started from pillars in the very first meetings of training camp, and very early on, because you have such a short period to get these things done. Everything was established, orderly, organized on top. Obviously, with the CEBL, you know yourself, sometimes logistically there's a little bit of problems off the court when it comes to scheduling and things like that. But when it mattered most, those three things that you said you gained from Ryan, I think they really all were crucial to us having a great season.
I mean, when I think of CEBL basketball, and you and I talked about this a lot, Nicola, but like me looking at it as a coach, obviously I haven't coached at that level, but just looking at it from outside, like it is probably one of the more difficult, you know, teams to coach because you're there for the season's 2 months long, right? You're not there for a long time. You have a bunch of guys who, you know, might have high egos or whatnot, but they're kind of trying to just put up a lot of numbers and then kind of go to a better situation in a way, right? So, like, what do you think was like the biggest challenge for you as being a head coach, in the summertime, just coaching a group of guys that are there for 2 to 3 months max?
Um, yeah, this year was actually probably one of the more challenging years too because the entire team was pretty young.
Mm.
We had a few vets, but um, I think everybody would say we probably had the youngest team in the league. And there was a lot of guys that were trying to move up or trying to get their first contract or like it was a lot of those kind of dynamics that was going on. Um, so earlier on, it was good because the message was, okay, well, it happens when you win as a team, and when you win as a team, then that's when you get more recognition. And more of the teams overseas are probably looking at, oh, let me watch some of the top two teams or the top three teams in the CEBL rather than, the bottom team. So I think earlier on that really helped in terms of, trying to enforce winning and a winning culture and everyone playing together. Uh, and again, I think we had pretty good character guys. So that part of it never really stopped in terms of still wanting to win. Um, there were some pitfalls, there were some issues. We ended up turning over roster and things like that, which kind of affected that. But um, I would say that is the biggest challenge, and just making sure everybody's bought in on like just the winning part. But I actually do think the guys did their very best in terms of saying like every game it's another game for us to win, and hopefully we're putting the right things on film to be able to achieve our goal with their individual goal.
How early do you begin to think about and build a roster for the upcoming CBL season? So let's say now, what, May 2025 is the new season. When do you start thinking about the CBL and who you want on your team?
Man, because our year didn't go the way I wanted to, I'm already thinking about it. Like that's already started. It started in August for me.
Yeah.
Um, so after we get off of this podcast, Nico, I'm giving you a call. But but yeah, it starts really early. And just in terms of identifying, you kind of always know which guys you probably want to go after. Um, and then after the protected list comes out, then you have an actual idea of who you can really go after sooner than later. But I think I can speak for myself and Jermaine Anderson, where we say like it's not a full-time year-round job, but it's a year-round job.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things, at least overseas, I feel especially in the lower and mid-level leagues, honestly, even some of the top ones, for Europeans, a big priority is signing import guards, right? Every team you play, generally speaking, has a one or a two that's an American and scores the ball and probably makes the most or near the most money on the team. With building a CEBL roster, do you have certain positions you really, want to guys you want to sign in early? Like how do you go about building a roster?
Yeah, I think the key thing is always to have the best Canadians.
Yeah.
So the more of the high level Canadians you could get, I think the better. Because you're always going to be able to find, I shouldn't say always, but you're hoping that you'll always be able to find, the imports. There's so many of them, at the different positions that you need. But if you can get the best Canadian talent, regardless, like whatever position it is, and then I think after that, then you could say, okay, well, um, we have a really good Canadian shooting guard, wing, and power forward. Now I know that we need import 5 and import 1. I think it kind of works out a little bit better that way, and you just kind of factor that you're going to need, 3 imports in your budget, and you kind of just stick to that amount. Hopefully, that you want to be able to pay them.
So what now you're going to go into your second year as a coach. I'm sure you've had, like you said, it was a learning curve this first year. Where is your vision with the Honey Badgers and how you want the organization to grow, with you kind of at the head?
Uh, I think in terms of the culture, like I think the culture that remains the same. I've really bought into the culture that we've established over the past 5 seasons. But definitely, like we want to be able to compete for a championship, and so it's a matter of making sure the off court things are up to par, and that it would be beneficial for our Canadians, so that we're able to get the highest level Canadians that we possibly can. Obviously, we're hoping that the team can be a little bit more mature. Um, for the most part, you're still going to have your young guys or your guys that are just coming out of NCAA, but hopefully just having a few more that have played 3, 4, 5 seasons already overseas. I think those are the 2 biggest things, like just getting the high level Canadians and them just being a little bit more mature and have a little bit more experience. And then just kind of figuring it out and going from there.
You as a head coach, thinking long term, as a player, when you're growing up and young, obviously everyone's dream is the NBA, right? As you get older, paths change, goals change, whatever the case may be. For you as a head coach now at this point in your life, what are some goals or aspirations that you have set for yourself? It can be short term, it can be long term, but something that you, looking back when your career is over as a coach, that you want to be like, I'm very glad I achieved that.
I actually really love the CEBL. As crazy as this sounds, like I really love it. Like when we go back, I was talking previously about the summer pro-am league that I was running. Like this is actually to me like a higher level summer pro-am league, right? And
Yep.
that I felt like the country needed, and now the country has it. So I really love the position that I'm in, and I want to be able to remain, in the CEBL for a while. How long I don't know, but I also want to be a youth sports head coach. So that's the other thing that I'm, aiming for and shooting for. Yeah, and again, these are kind of more short-term goals. Kind of like before what I said previously, where yeah, like you want to be able to make the most amount of money. You want to be able to say that you coach at the highest level and all those kind of things. But I'm not really chasing after it. Like when the opportunities come, I think that they come, and I think when you're successful at the level that you're at, and you're doing your very best, and you remain high character, individual, then the rest come and the success comes. So, would I want to coach in the NBA one day? Of course. But I wouldn't say that necessarily like that's the only thing that I'm going after, and I'm not stopping until I get there. I think I'm just kind of focused on where I'm at now and being the very best that I can be at those levels right now, and then seeing what comes out of it.
Nice, I like it. Ray, you got any more questions?
Oh, that's it. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, me too. Sheldon, it's always a pleasure talking to you and picking your brain. And thanks for coming on the pod, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's great to be able to talk with you, Nico, again, and Ray. I always hear really good things about Ray as well. In terms of his coaching and what he's done with a lot of the high school kids. So appreciate
Tell a
that.
lot.
Yeah, yeah. And I know he works with Nico. Throughout the summer. Hopefully, this
You
summer
don't
you
want
guys
him. You
will
don't
see
want
Nico as much. Yeah, you don't need him this summer coming up. You can.
him.